making the bow tie with 24 gauge square wire. When it comes off the spool, I always like to make sure to straighten it out before working with it, especially working in a way that we need the wires to be square. Then we have our first bend. That's to get the wires running parallel to each other. When bending the wires, we want to make sure that they stay as square and flat as possible, staying aware of how it's being bent. If you haven't seen the round wire bow tie tutorial I have, I'd suggest checking that out to see why we're doing this the way we are. Just grab just the edge, bend that over the pliers, keeping the square running square. Put the stone in there to check it out, see how it fits. When we bend this, we want to make sure that this is the size of the stone or even slightly smaller. We want to make sure that the stone doesn't slide out the side and so it holds tight. Always tightening it up, trying to make sure that it stays square. If the setting does end up being too large for the stone, there's a way to tighten that up at the end, and I can show that in a later video. You could build it down the right side, stone for stone, but I prefer to build it down the left side completely and then come back to the right side and bend a symmetrical set. So we'll just keep repeating those same moves. Fast forwarding a little bit. Trying to make it so there's enough wire going over the top of the stones to hold them in securely, but not too much where it starts to cover up the stone. Bending it around, adjusting it. The last setting did end up being a little bit smaller, but that's okay. I normally like to err on the side of slightly smaller than too big. So now on this other side, we're going to mirror what we did on the first side. We'll keep repeating those same steps. Bending it and always adjusting it. Fast forwarding a little bit. Now we have the symmetrical side done. So now we're going to secure the two sides together with 28 gauge wire. As always, I like to have my tie-offs around one wire to start, and then bring the two sides together to tighten them. And it doesn't have to be 28 gauge wire, it could really be anything. When pulling the two wires together, the square wire definitely seems like it holds more secure and there's less shifting, similar to why ring bands are made with square wire as opposed to round wire. The square wires will just hold tighter together. So we'll pop that first stone in there, bring those two together a little bit more. That started to poke me, so I'm going to chop that off, tuck that wire a little bit, bring those two together. We're going to take the 28 gauge wire and going in the same direction, we're going to continue to twist that around the bottom side of the stone, going across the stone and up in between our next setting. Always adjusting it. Pinch those two sides together, squishing it around the stone. As long as the stones are poking out the side a little bit, but not enough where the stone will slide out the side. And we can do a lot more adjusting later. That'll be in a later video. Get the last stone in there, twist it around, finally finish it off. Doing our tie off around one wire, tucking that. Sometimes it'll be bent out of shape a little bit. We'll just bend that up, Those stones aren't going anywhere. And we can continue to adjust this, exposing the stones even more. I'm going to have that in a separate video for my patrons soon. And here we have it, the finished bow tie. So now we'll cut that first bend, separate those two wires, and now we have those to tie off to the piece. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for your patronage, and happy creating.